So for me, this record really does epitomise Malevolence, and it is the album that they really needed to make. That sort of swagger attitude and where the fuck were you confrontational idea is pretty much like all over this record. Hey there guys, welcome back and hello if you are new. I hope you guys have had a really great week so far, and this week's review is a band that I think really have a huge amount of eyes on them at the minute. After breaking through ceiling after ceiling after ceiling on 2022's Malicious Intent, Malevolence really have upped their game in every sense of the word, and I have to say I do not envy them because they have the very difficult task of writing the follow-up in the form of Where Only the Truth Is Spoken, the record I'm going to be reviewing today. So if you're not familiar with Malevolence, they are fast becoming one of the biggest names in metalcore, hardcore, sort of adjacent music. For me personally, they have elements of groove metal with a hardcore ethos and very much that sort of DIY idea. In terms of what you might expect sonically, their last record I think was their biggest jump, but really it sounds like if you were to put Hatebreed, Pantera, Crowbar and Lamb of God all into a blender, you would get Malevolence, and with that sort of Sheffield UK grit as well. So Where Only the Truth Is Spoken, complete with Sean Bean quote, really kind of acts similar to a self-titled record. And the main reason for that is because it revolves around everything that Malevolence truly stand for, right? It's rooted in those hardcore principles of loyalty, honesty, and sticking by what you say and having the actions to back it up. So the record also chronicles the band's sort of trials and tribulations, you know. One great example for me is I interviewed the band at Download in 2018, and basically they themselves were telling me, you know, people were like, who let the chavs in kind of thing, but at the end of the day they were just being unapologetically themselves and not conforming to some boring fucking stereotype that, you know, everyone has to look a certain way. And who's laughing now, right?
Metal lyrics or like fantasy shit talking about fucking goblins or Vikings or whatever, like
keep it real.
Good vibe, positive, you know.
Just the kind of music that makes you want to go out and smash your day.
Yeah. And as this is an elevation, the band have really upped the ante in terms of the record as well. The album was produced in Dave Grohl's studio. It features a guest spot from Randy Bly of Lamb of God on In Spite, and was also produced by Josh Wilbur. So, you know, big names here that I think, you know, really showcase the level of gravitas that Malevolence have now. Overall though, the record has a feeling of like, you know, that swagger, that sort of confidence that only I think Malevolence can really pull off. But as much as there is confidence, there's always humility and respect, I feel like. And that's the perfect line that this band sort of straddle. The band themselves have been, you know, going out with some massive modern metal greats. And I think, you know, they haven't been cocky. What they have done is watch and learn and, you know, sort of pay homage and taking lessons from these truly fantastic artists to bring what they have learned and put that into their arsenal to make them an even better band. Which, ironically, all comes back to the ethos of the record, which is very much respect. Musically though, I think this record really does embrace the more metallic, sort of heavy side of the band. Blood to the Leech, for example, was the first song, and it literally sounds like some of these riffs could have come off a Psychroptic record. You know, they're very, very technical. Josh's legato is just absolutely fantastic. Similarly though, In Spite also skews a little bit more technical, a bit more metal, and has some really, really great moments on there, but it doesn't necessarily sort of become overbearing. And then Dirt From My Grave reminded me quite a lot of Machine Head, especially with some of those harmonics at the end, which is a really, really great, like that's a good thing for me personally. And there's even kind of a main riff in Trenches that kind of moves into the world of slam. So I do really think that there are little hints of death metal and, you know, a little bit more extreme ideas than what is just basically straight up metalcore hardcore. But it has to be said, I think some of these songs were definitely made for a live setting. You know, Salt the Wound in particular, I think has a really, really great energy to it. And then you've got Counterfeit and If It's All the Same to You, which I think will be the soundtrack to many crowd surfers grinning as they, you know, come over the barrier, basically. Oh, and what's the other one? So Help Me God is bound to cause some serious injuries in that breakdown, I think. But even though I'm kind of talking a little bit more about the metal side of things, there's still that sense of grit that makes this very much a Malevolence record. You know, the spit sample at the end of So Help Me God, even all of like Trenches, basically. It's a shared idea of lived experience that really is something that I think no one else can take from this band. And where solos are concerned, I think, you know, Josh Baines does an absolutely fantastic job. Salt the Wound is a personal favourite of mine. I like the sort of narrative of that one. But then we've got Counterfeit, which has some cool, like, diminished runs. And the Trenches solo is kind of, like, quite fast and sort of says its piece and then goes, which I quite liked. A lot of the solos really, you know, fit the kind of piece of the song that they're in and go really, really well in the overall sort of arc of the record. But I have to say, I think the MVP of this record is Alex. His vocals are by far the best they've ever been. Every lyric is spat out with so much venom and aggression that it literally feels like he's about to come and deck you through the fucking headphones. However, it's what he's saying that I think is the biggest appeal for me. The lyrics here, I can't remember if it is Alex that writes them all on his own or if it's other members of the band, but anyway, the lyrics have always been a strong point with me, but I think they're really sort of visceral. They don't like pull any punches. It's very much kind of does exactly what it says on the tin and not afraid of that integrity, which I think is really, really cool and has always been a big plus point for me with Malevolence over the years. And whereas Conan was, or Con, I'm not sure what he prefers to go by, but whereas Conan was, you know, kind of like the surprise element of Malicious Intent for me, I feel like they've really integrated him into this record. Salt the Wound, I think, you know, really embellishes his voice beautifully. And, you know, this caterpillar has very much become a butterfly. I'm sure that he'd be thrilled to be to be called a butterfly. But I think Heaven's Shake is a really great example of that. And it's a track that really kind of puts him at the forefront. But I think another thing that's really great about this record is how the relationship between Alex and Conan has sort of come about. And the two of them really, really work nicely together. And talking of vocals, there's also the guest appearance of Randy Bly, who is on In Spite. I think his guest appearance is really, really cool. Comes in for this breakdown, which adds so much more kind of like, you know, like raw aggression to it, and doesn't just sound like it's been like tacked on. Also, he's Randy from Lamb of God, you know, that's a pretty big move. So for me, this record really does epitomise Malevolence, and it is the album that they really needed to make. I think it has really got their sound nailed. That sort of swagger attitude and where the fuck were you confrontational idea is pretty much like all over this record. And they really feel like more than just a band, but like, you know, like a brotherhood, like a gang. But that sense of brotherhood is really all over this record. And no matter what, if you were in the trenches, these lot would definitely help you out. So I hope you guys enjoyed this album review. Let me know what you think in the comments underneath me. If you did enjoy it, it'd be great if you could hit like and subscribe and share if you want. You know, spread the good word of the Metal Tris. Wow, I used my own name. I've never done that before. Anyway, I will see you guys very, very soon for more album reviews, interviews, and all that good stuff. Take care, my friends.